Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the cul-de-sac, had officially crossed the line from annoying to cruel. And she wasn't done yet. She called a vote to have our therapy equipment removed from our yard for visual pollution. She filed a formal complaint because my son walked funny past her rose bushes. Little did she know, the boy she humiliated in public, he's a national Paralympic gold medalist. And I didn't spend 15 years as a litigation lawyer for nothing. She wanted a war? Great, because I came with receipts. We moved into the Lakeside Ridge community last spring. Quiet neighborhood, lake access, HOA run, but nothing outrageous. At least, that's what the realtor said. Turns out they left out one tiny detail. Karen. Not her real name, of course. But if you've ever lived in a neighborhood with an HOA, you've met a Karen. She wasn't just on the HOA board, she was the HOA board. President, secretary, enforcer, and I assume self-appointed morality police. Everything had to go through her. Paint colors, mailbox shape, garden gnome count. And heaven forbid your grass grew more than 2.5 inches tall. She'd be on your front steps with a ruler. Still, we kept our heads down. I wasn't interested in starting neighborly drama, not when our son, Aiden, needed peace. He was recovering from a brutal car accident that nearly paralyzed him. The fact that he could walk at all, braces, wobble and all, was a miracle. Every inch he walked was a mile earned through therapy, grit, and more resilience than most adults I know. We installed a few pieces of medical equipment in the backyard, some bars, a small ramp, and a therapy bike. Nothing loud, nothing offensive, just tools that helped him build strength. But Karen didn't see it that way. She saw non-conforming structures and unauthorized modifications to common-facing property. She fined us $250 because our therapy ramp was visible from the sidewalk. At first, I thought it was a mistake, so I went to the HOA meeting. That's when she doubled down. She said we were violating Section 3.1.2 of the Aesthetic Compliance Clause, whatever the heck that means, and accused us of lowering the visual standard of the neighborhood. When I tried to explain calmly, professionally, what the equipment was for, she cut me off. Said, this isn't a rehab facility, it's a community. The kicker? She motioned to have our equipment removed, not just fined, removed, as in gone, within 30 days. But things truly hit the fan at the neighborhood BBQ. Aiden, God bless him, showed up wearing his favorite Team USA cap and tried to mingle with the other kids. He walked a little unevenly. That's what spinal rehab does. Karen saw him, narrowed her eyes, and barked, you know, if he's going to drag his feet like that, maybe he should stay home. That was it. I looked around. Some people looked away. Others just awkwardly laughed. No one said a word, but I was done playing nice. What Karen didn't know and what she was about to find out is that Aiden isn't just some kid walking funny. He's a two-time gold medalist in junior-level Paralympic track and field. He's trained with national-level coaches. He's been featured in local news and was even honored by our city council. And me, I spent nearly 2 decades as a defense lawyer. I know HOA law. I know their limits. I know the ADA. And I know exactly how to tear apart a bylaw clause without ever raising my voice. Karen thinks she's protected by HOA policies and petty power games. But I have a binder full of state codes, a son who refuses to quit, and a community that's about to see her for who she really is. And the best part? It's all going to happen in public. Let me tell you something I learned real fast after moving into a homeowners association neighborhood. It's not the big laws that get you, it's the little rules, twisted just enough to feel like a noose. After the cookout incident, you'd think Karen might lay low for a bit. Maybe reflect on the fact that she publicly humiliated a disabled kid and, just stop talking. But no, Karen doesn't retreat. She reorganizes. Within a week, we started getting letters. First, it was a notice of non-compliance regarding our backyard therapy ramp. Structure visible from the street line, not pre-approved by the Architectural Review Committee. Never mind that the structure was a removable aluminum ramp we only used during Aiden's evening sessions. Never mind that we'd submitted photos weeks ago and never got a response. Then came the fines, $50 for unsightly yard conditions, $75 for non-standard equipment, or $120 for noise disturbance, which, get this, was the sound of my son's therapeutic treadmill humming at 7 p.m. We were running a rehab facility, she said, and that wasn't allowed. I laughed at first, thought, this woman's just petty. But petty got real expensive, real fast. The puppet master behind the paperwork, see, Karen didn't just enforce the rules. She wrote most of them. Over the years, she'd slowly amended bylaws during low-attendance HOA meetings, ones most residents didn't even know were happening. She'd sprinkle in language like aesthetic cohesion, community character, temporary structures subject to approval, all vague enough to use like a fly swatter on whoever ticked her off. And people let her. Why? Because no one wants to argue with the woman who calls code enforcement over a mailbox color. They just paid the fines, trimmed their hedges, and prayed she never learned their dog's name. But here's where things get interesting. I started reading the HOA bylaws. I mean, really reading them, highlighting things, making notes. It was like pulling on a loose thread and watching a whole sweater unravel. She'd written herself exemptions, clauses that allowed her to waive rules in cases of community benefit, which mysteriously applied only to her flower beds, her mailbox gazebo, and her weekly Pilates class on the tennis courts. She'd even installed solar panels without prior review, something she fined another neighbor $200 for. And don't even get me started on the time she used HOA funds to repaint the clubhouse, because beige was depressing. So I started asking questions. Nicely, of course. Lawyer nicely. And that's when the retaliation kicked in. A safety concern and a trash can scandal. One afternoon, I came home to find a neon orange safety violation notice taped to our front door. The ramp was unstable, it said, a tripping hazard. It had to be removed immediately, or we'd be referred to the Municipal Safety Inspection Office. That's not a thing, by the way, I checked. The next day, someone accidentally knocked over our trash cans, 4 times in 1 week. Then a neighbor told me Karen had been going door to door, telling people I was turning the neighborhood into a liability, that I was preparing to sue the HOA, that my son was faking it for attention. That's when I stopped laughing. Not because it hurt, because I knew exactly what kind of story she was trying to spin and how to dismantle it, the real power play. Now here's something Karen didn't know. I'd been on the board of an HOA before, years ago. Not a big one, just a small community out west. I knew how these little neighborhood kingdoms worked, and more importantly, I knew how to flip one from the inside. So I started making calls, quietly, met with a few neighbors over coffee, brought up some of the rules that didn't make sense, like why Karen could host weekly board meetings in her own home with no public notice, or why the HOA newsletter had a whole page dedicated to community beautification tips by Karen. Turns out, I wasn't the only one who'd had enough. There was Janine, whose dog got reported for excessive wagging, Carlos, who was fined for parking his truck too confidently, and sweet old Martha, who'd been shamed at an HOA meeting for putting a wreath on her door before November 15th. A rebellion was brewing, but we needed something big, something undeniable. And Karen, God bless her, gave it to us. A week after our last fine, we got a letter. HOA emergency meeting, mandatory attendance. It was about a serious community violation. The kind of vague wording that makes you wonder if someone's backyard was found full of stolen shopping carts. We showed up. There were cookies on the table, Karen's signature lemon bars, and a giant projector screen. Karen stood up like she was about to reveal a criminal conspiracy. Instead, she clicked to a photo of Aiden using his walker in our driveway, and then another zoomed in of our therapy ramp. She turned to the group and said, "This kind of disorder cannot be allowed to continue. It's lowering home values and, frankly, it's depressing." Depressing. She called my son's rehab depressing. There was silence, then a murmur. Then Martha stood up, bless her 72-year-old heart, and said, "Karen, he's trying to walk. What exactly is your problem?" And just like that, the tide turned. That night, I emailed a formal request to access HOA financial records and internal communications, as allowed by California Civil Code 45200. Yes, I knew the statute by heart. Karen tried to deny the request, so I filed a complaint with the Department of Consumer Affairs, and I CC'd the entire HOA. The next day, 5 neighbors knocked on my door. They wanted to know how to hold a vote to remove a board member. And just like that, Karen's iron grip started to slip. One Sunday morning, I walked outside to find our therapy ramp soaked, puddles everywhere, the mat slippery and unusable. My son Aiden had his braces on and was halfway down the front step when I stopped him. "Don't," I said. "You'll fall." I bent down and touched the wood, sopping wet. But it hadn't rained in 2 weeks. I followed the trail of water down the sidewalk and around the corner, right to Karen's yard. She'd redirected her sprinkler system to spray our front walkway. Her excuse? Water pressure issue. "I'm just doing my Sunday lawn maintenance." Right. That night, I installed a security camera facing our yard, and it didn't take long to confirm what I suspected. The next morning, 6:47 a.m., Karen, in her pink robe and slippers, crept into frame, holding a garden hose. She sprayed the ramp like she was trying to put out a fire. That footage? Saved, labeled, time-stamped. But wait, she wasn't done. A few days later, I noticed Aiden struggling more than usual during his therapy. His gait was off. He kept complaining that his walker felt weird. I took a look. 2 of the rubber grips on the walker had been cut, clean slashes right through the padding. The screws on the bottom were loosened. Someone had tampered with it. That was the last straw for me. I checked our footage. Nothing caught directly, but the backyard gate had been open twice at 2:15 a.m. the night before. Same hour, same pattern, always when we were sleeping. I called the police, filed a report. They said unless I had video of her physically doing it, it'd be hard to press charges. But I knew. We all knew. Even Aiden knew. And he said something that broke me. "Maybe we should move, Dad. Maybe I don't belong here." No, that wasn't going to happen. I wasn't just fighting for my son anymore. I was fighting for every quiet neighbor who paid their fines, shut their mouths, and let Karen rule this neighborhood like a petty dictator. Meanwhile, things in the neighborhood were heating up. A few brave souls had joined me in filing formal complaints against Karen's misuse of HOA funds. Carlos posted side-by-side photos of Karen's approved mailbox archway and his own, which she'd fined him $100 for. They were nearly identical, except hers had solar-powered fairy lights. Then came Janine. Sweet, soft-spoken Janine. She went to one HOA meeting and simply asked, "When exactly were we allowed to vote on the last landscaping budget?" Karen responded by slapping her with a $50 fine for failure to maintain hedge height the very next morning. So Janine filed a public records request. And the findings? Oh, they were gold. Turns out Karen had authorized HOA checks, unsigned by any second board member, for over $6,000 to a landscaping company. That company? Her nephews. Registered 2 months before the emergency landscape refresh project started. Guess what the refresh included? Replacing flowers on her own property, power washing the clubhouse where she hosts her Pilates, and repainting the HOA office, which also happened to be her converted garage. She'd funneled community money into her own vanity projects for years, and people were finally waking up. I wish I were kidding. After the sabotage, the fines, and the smear campaign, Karen's next move was to call Child Protective Services on us. She claimed Aiden was being subjected to unsafe mobility practices and that our equipment posed a danger to a minor. A social worker showed up. She was kind, respectful, and clearly annoyed she had to be there. After touring our home and speaking to Aiden, she turned to me and said, "We've had 3 calls from the same number over the last month, all anonymous, all referencing your son's walking aids." She paused. "We're filing this under false report and harassment." Now I was really angry. Karen had officially stepped out of the HOA realm and into real-world consequences, and I was done being quiet. I compiled everything: photos, emails, video of the sprinkler sabotage, HOA bylaw violations, financial records, her next-door post, the false CPS call with the caseworker's statement. I created a timeline and presented it to the HOA's oversight committee, state regulatory body, and finally a community-wide email that simply said, "Enough is enough." Attached, documented misconduct by CHOA President Karen S. Please join us for an open forum this Sunday. Let's discuss the future of our neighborhood. What happened next? Well, Karen didn't see it coming. Some people crumble under pressure, others explode. But Karen walked into the fire wearing pearls and a clipboard, and she really thought she was untouchable. Bless her heart. So about that community forum we scheduled, the one with the email subject line, "Enough is enough," Well, 24 hours after I sent it out, Karen sent her own message through the HOA mailing list. This Sunday's unauthorized gathering is not an official HOA event and will not be recognized under our bylaws. She even posted a notice at the clubhouse door. Closed due to maintenance. Nice try. We held the meeting at the local church down the road. Free coffee, chairs for everyone, and, unlike Karen, actual transparency. And people showed up. We had 42 households represented. That's 80% of the neighborhood, including Janine, Carlos, Martha, and even the new couple who just moved in and hadn't even unpacked their blender yet. I walked in with a binder under my arm, a quiet son by my side, and a flash drive full of receipts. Karen? She walked in 20 minutes late like she was Beyoncé arriving at a press conference. Except Beyoncé doesn't threaten to sue you for discussing her flower bed budget. I opened with a PowerPoint titled, A Pattern of Abusive Misconduct and Misuse of Authority by Karen S., HOA President. No fluff, no drama, just facts. Slide 1, a timeline of fines against my family over the past 3 months. Slide 2, photos of the sabotage, our soaked ramp, the tampered walker. Slide 3, video footage of Karen hosing down our front yard at dawn. Slide 4, the next door post calling out special needs families. Slide 5, HOA budget excerpts showing $6,420 paid to her nephew's landscaping company. Murmurs rippled through the room. Some people gasped. A few nodded like, yep, sounds about right. Then came slide 6, an audio recording. That's right. I'd attended the last closed-door HOA board meeting as a silent observer, allowed by bylaw clause 431, and I'd recorded her saying, we can't have these pity projects on display. I don't care what the kid's issue is, this neighborhood has standards. A beat of silence. Then Janine stood up and said, you said that? About a child? Karen blinked. It was taken out of context. Someone else shouted, what context makes that okay? It was glorious. Karen tried to regain control. She stood up, smug as ever, and said, this is a targeted smear campaign. Everything he's shown you is twisted. He doesn't even respect the rules of this community. I calmly stepped forward and said, respecting the rules is one thing. Weaponizing them to harass a disabled child is another. And then I dropped the big one, a letter from the California Department of Housing and Community Development. It confirmed that Karen's use of fines violated fair housing protections. Her refusal to accommodate disability-related modifications was illegal under the ADA. The HOA was at risk of a discrimination lawsuit if corrective action wasn't taken. Then I passed the microphone to Aiden. He didn't say much, just enough. I'm not broken, I'm just rebuilding. And this place made me feel like I didn't belong. He looked at Karen. You didn't like how I walked, but I earned every step, every limp, every wobble. That's strength, not weakness. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Even Martha, stoic Martha, had to take off her glasses and dab her face with a napkin. After the presentation, Carlos stood up and called for a motion. I moved to hold a special election to remove Karen S. as president of the HOA board. Effective immediately. Cheers. Actual cheers. Janine seconded it. We passed around a clipboard. Within 10 minutes, we had 38 signatures, more than enough for a majority under HOA bylaws. Karen looked stunned. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. She said something about lawyers and libel, but no one was listening anymore. The power had shifted. The fear was gone. And just like that, Karen was out. She left the meeting with her little leopard print planner clutched to her chest. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't say a word. Someone held the door for her. And as she walked out into the parking lot, limping a little in her heels, I almost felt bad. But then I looked at Aiden, who was standing tall, next to me, shoulders back, head high. And I thought, nah, let's call it justice. In the weeks that followed, the new interim HOA board, led by Janine, reversed our fines. They updated the bylaws to include mandatory ADA compliance. The landscaping contracts were frozen pending an audit, and the neighborhood finally started feeling like a community, not a kingdom. Aiden, he's back in training. He's got his eye on next year's nationals. And our therapy ramp, it's been rebuilt, stronger, safer, approved. One neighbor even offered to help repaint it. Another brought cookies. Martha made brownies and called it a solidarity snack. Karen's house went up for sale 3 weeks later. The listing said, "Charming property with community charm." Oh, the irony. 2 weeks after our legendary community meeting, I received a call from a man named Richard. He introduced himself as a representative from the California Franchise Tax Board, and the call went something like this. "Sir, we received a packet of documents regarding potential misuse of nonprofit HOA funds. Did you submit this?" I had, anonymously, of course. The same folder I'd shown at the meeting with financial inconsistencies, the nephew's landscaping company, and the suspicious $6,000 in no-bid contracts had found its way into the hands of the right people. Karen had always been good at hiding behind bylaws and HOA technicalities. What she wasn't good at? Tax law. Turns out her nephew's business had failed to report several of those payments as income. Even better, the landscaping company didn't technically have the licenses required to operate in a residential zone. The HOA was now under review for improper contractor engagement and possible self-dealing under Civil Code Section 5235. Karen wasn't arrested. This isn't a Hollywood movie. But she was personally fined, and the HOA was ordered to repay misused funds into the community budget. And just like that, the woman who fined us $250 for a therapy ramp was now writing a check to the neighborhood she used to rule. Oh, how the mighty stumble. With Karen out, the new board, led by Janine and a few other sane human beings, got to work. First order of business, repeal every last one of Karen's vanity bylaws. Gone was the hedge height clause. Gone were the visual uniformity guidelines. Gone was the absurd, no medical devices visible from public spaces policy that she'd invented just for us. In its place, the board passed something better. The Neighborhood Inclusion and Accessibility Amendment. It guaranteed full ADA compliance protection for mobility aids and therapy equipment, a formal process for neighbor complaints that didn't involve whispering to Karen behind a clipboard. They even voted to use part of the recovered funds to build a small community wellness garden with benches, a walking path, and, you guessed it, a custom-built therapy ramp for Aiden and others like him. But here's the part that got me. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Carlos turned to Aiden and said, "Kid, you started something big here. This is your legacy." Aiden just smiled, quiet, humble, but his chest puffed out just a little. He'd walked in shame on that ramp once. Now the whole neighborhood had built one for him. The weirdest part of all, people started being neighbors again. Martha brought over brownies every other Thursday like clockwork. Carlos helped fix the latch on our fence without even asking. One of the newer residents, Beth, I think her name was, stopped by with her teenage daughter and asked, would Aiden want a walking buddy after school? Just someone to chat with? It wasn't perfect. Some folks were still wary. A few still whispered. But the fear was gone. The Karen effect had worn off. It was like everyone had realized at the same time that maybe being decent to each other wasn't such a radical idea. About 3 months after her fall from grace, a for sale sign appeared in front of Karen's house. No farewell party, no goodbye cookies, just a U-Haul, a moving crew, and a stunned-looking woman watching her kingdom get boxed up piece by piece. I won't lie, I watched from my porch. Aiden sat beside me, sipping orange Gatorade, still in his workout gear from that morning's therapy. He said, "She looks smaller now." I said, "That's what happens when people stop looking up to her." Karen got in her car and drove away without a single neighbor waving. And just like that, she was gone. About 6 months later, we sat in the bleachers of a small stadium an hour outside of town. It was a warm spring afternoon. Aiden was standing on the track, braces polished, new shoes laced tight, number pinned to his chest. The announcer called his name. Representing Lakeside Ridge, Aiden Grant. The crowd clapped politely. Then a few people stood. I looked around and realized it was Janine, Carlos, Martha, and half a dozen others from our neighborhood. They'd driven out to watch him run, and when that starting pistol fired, he ran like a kid who had nothing to prove, only something to celebrate. He didn't win that day. But he finished, head high, stride strong, and when he crossed that line, the entire Lakeside Ridge crew cheered like he'd just won Olympic gold. Maybe he had. There's a lot I could say about HOA power and petty tyrants and how some people will twist rules to control everyone around them. But really it comes down to this. A rule book doesn't make someone right. Kindness doesn't mean weakness. And justice doesn't always come with sirens and headlines. Sometimes it's just a boy walking proud down his driveway while the woman who tried to break him quietly packs her bags. Karen thought we were just another family she could push around. She never imagined we'd be the ones who'd push back, with facts, with calm, with community. And that's the thing about power. When people stop being afraid, it disappears. Rules are not weapons. HOA rules are meant to protect shared spaces, not to police personal struggles. They're not swords to swing at people who don't look like you, walk like you, or plant the wrong flowers in their yard. Weaponizing bylaws to target a disabled child, that's not maintaining standards. That's cruelty, dressed in khakis and a name badge. Leadership isn't a personality type. Just because someone is loud, organized, and knows how to format a PDF newsletter doesn't mean they should lead a community. Real leadership looks like listening. It looks like compromise. It looks like walking across the street to ask your neighbor, "How can we help?" instead of "How can we fine you?" Know the law or meet someone who does. Karen forgot something important. ADA compliance isn't optional. Discriminating against someone with a disability, that's not enforcing aesthetics. That's breaking federal law. She learned that the hard way. So if you're part of an HOA board, maybe invite someone who's actually read the Fair Housing Act before you start writing new regulations. It'll save you a whole lot of lawsuits and probably a documentary later. And finally, dear viewers, if you've made it this far in the story, first of all, thank you. You're our kind of people. Secondly, we want to hear your story. Have you ever had a run-in with a petty HOA? Know a Karen who ruled with an iron fist and a garden hose? Ever watched a tyrant fall, slowly, legally, and oh so satisfyingly? Drop it in the comments. We read every single one. We laugh, we cringe, we sometimes take notes. You never know, your story might be our next video. And hey, if you've got a neighbor like Martha who bakes brownies and supports the good fight, tag her, thank her, give her a shout out in the comments. Because in a world full of Karens, we need a few more Marthas. Like, share, and subscribe if you want more real stories where justice takes its sweet, delicious time, then lands like a mic drop. And remember, you may not choose your neighbors, but you can choose how you respond when the clipboard comes knocking. Until next time, folks, stay kind, stay sharp, and keep your therapy ramps dry.